1.5 million Americans a year undergo either bypass surgery or stent placement to clear clogged arteries to the heart. The procedures help account for the record.
In 1980, 15% of American adults were obese. Today, that number has doubled to 30%.
There's a major recall of ground beef spreading today to 20 states.
Despite all this money, a new analysis finds that the United States places last among industrialized nations in preventable deaths.
Doctors say child obesity can lead to liver disease.
Studies show that money worries can cause depression, addiction, and obesity.
A new survey shows that for many Americans, healthcare debt is a major financial pain.
After 5 days of food riots, Haiti's prime minister was ousted.
They pass more greenhouse gas than the typical SUV.
Because Americans love the mall. They love the mall. That's where they get to satisfy their two most prominent addictions at the same time: shopping and eating.
The new data has convincing evidence that processed meats, including bacon and ham, can cause colorectal cancer.
We may be going into the bust now, but can you forget all of those those successive quarters of growth? It was unparalleled in American history.
For every GDP dollar of growth, they generated $5 to $6 in debt. The growth was completely illusory. Just because you have Americans that weigh 300 or 400 pounds waddling down the mall, stuffing themselves like ducks on a foie gras farm, you can't equate that to growth. That's disgusting.
Hello, I'm Jay Gordon. The news about our physical, financial, and environmental health is distressing. Worldwide, our weight, our debt, and our consumption are out of control. It's almost like a mad scientist has been engaged in some bizarre, twisted experiment to see how sick and fat he can actually get us. For all intents and purposes, the experiment has succeeded. We've been stuffed with lies about our economy.
The economy is doing reasonably well.
Just as we've been stuffed with lies about our food. Our information is processed for us. Our food is processed for us. We've become processed people. So we have to ask ourselves, how did we get here? And what can we do?
Clearly, we're moving less, we're eating more, we're getting much heavier. Plus, the type of foods we're eating has changed dramatically. We're eating foods that are more processed, more refined, and more calorie dense than ever before.
A lot of us are still undernourished, despite the fact that we're overfed. I mean, we're eating way more calories than we need, but we're still hungry in a way. Our cells are still craving something because we're not getting the nutrients we need. We're eating so much junk food.
When you eat a diet that's so unhealthy, you become a food addict, and it makes the body crave more calories just to feel well.
People are fat because they eat like kings and queens. They eat like aristocrats of old. I mean, look at the art and the written history of the past, and what you see is obese people with gout in their feet. When you eat a diet that is full of rich foods, what happens is the body adapts to those rich foods, and part of the adaptation is it puts on a tremendous amount of body fat, and it gets sick. It gets terribly burdened.
Americans have become really fat because we're sold really bad food.
When I was growing up, whenever we would go out for quote-unquote hamburgers, that was a rare event and it was a treat. And I know families now that this is how they feed their kids. It's like, okay, you're hungry, let's go to KFC. Tomorrow you go to McDonald's.
There are billions of dollars spent each and every year influencing children and adults to eat greasy, salty food. Food that is dense in calories while being completely not dense in nutrients.
So the Kaiser Foundation did a study recently over a few months on advertising, TV advertising to kids. And they analyzed 8,800 television ads. And out of those, the majority of them were for high fat, high salt, high sugar, high calorie foods for children. Of those 8,800 ads, guess how many were for fresh fruits and vegetables? Zero.
It takes between 3,400 and 4,000 calories to fill the stomach one time with chicken, cheese, and oil. It takes 200 calories to fill the stomach with vegetables. So as long as we continue to eat refined and processed foods and lots of animal foods, we're going to continue to have weight problems in this country.
I talk about this concept of toxic hunger, that when you don't meet your micronutrient needs, you feel very poorly when you stop eating for a few hours and your body stops digesting food. And you could feel shaky, weak, lightheaded, mentally confused. Overall, you feel ill, and you feel better if you eat food again.
You know, we're in the information age, and the amount of information available to us is just incredible. Not only can you get access to good information, you also have ready access to bad information. And most people do not know how to filter the information between what is good and what is bad.
We've turned over school lunch programs to fast food restaurants or private groups who are the lowest bidder, and they just come in with all kinds of junk and garbage.
The idea of offering chicken nuggets and pizza in the cafeteria may be appealing to a 9-year-old, but it's certainly not the diet that they should be living on.
We have a Department of Agriculture that subsidizes products like high fructose corn syrup, products like oils and fats that aren't good for us.
And factors that of how food affect the human body, and to create addictive drives and cravings. When you add corn syrup, when you add MSG, when you add a higher percentage of sugar, when you remove the fiber, when you remove the volume, when you don't have phytochemicals in your diet, a lot of these things play a role and interact. So the answer is very complicated.
And then we've cut out the PE classes because that was felt to be expendable and too expensive. And so then the kids don't even have a way to burn it up, and as a result, they're gaining weight.
I think Americans really haven't been challenged to think about what they eat. I don't even think they even think about it.
It's a difficult question, especially in a society today where, by the age of 40, autopsy studies show that almost all Americans have developed some form of heart disease. They have atherosclerosis.
Health, in my opinion, would be when you wake up in the morning, you don't have aches and pains, and you just absolutely have all this wonderful energy, and you don't have an illness, and you're not popping pills.
I used to see health as the opposite of disease, and I don't do that any longer. I think of health as our natural state.
Sickness is an abnormal state. The body's intended to be healthy. It's intended to look good, function well, and feel well. If it doesn't, then that's wrong. Even though in our society, wrong seems to be normal because so many people are wrong. They're sick, they're fat.
I really do believe that if we were not interfered with, if our bodies were not poisoned with toxic substance, and that's food and the environment, if we lived in a pure environment, we would be healthy.
Health is not just the absence of illness. It's the presence of well-being.
We have an explosion of high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, allergies, autoimmune conditions in this country. And so we can't say that a person with the absence of symptoms who feels well is healthy if we see signs that diseases are developing but haven't yet become symptomatic yet, can we? Could that be good health if you feel well and then develop cancer 5 years from now? Were you really healthy 5 years when you had no symptoms?
Health, if I'm correct, health came from the same root words as holy and whole. So to me, it's the whole composition of who I am and the way I exist in this world.
If in the year 1900 in America, only 2% of all Americans developed heart attacks and strokes, and today it's 51%, are we healthier today? And it looks as if we're living longer than we did in the 1900s because people aren't dying of these diseases at childbirth. They're not having so many infections in the first year of life.
So to me, to be healthy isn't just to eat healthy, but it's to have healthy relationships, healthy interactions with the environment, healthy family, healthy everything. And all of those things then come back to help improve my health too.
But the question is, in the last 15 years of life, do we have a healthy life expectancy in this country? How much do people suffer in those last 15 years of life? And the answer to that question is probably more than ever before.
That's the definition of health, the ability to engage in life fully, have all the energy you need to do all the things you want to do, and to maintain that until you die, to live until you die, instead of engaging in a gradual process of degeneration starting sometime around when you're 40 or 50 until you're just not functioning anymore. I think our approach to healthcare is really to teach people to deal with illness rather than teaching people to prize health.
I think we have a disease care system. I think it's phenomenally expensive.
I think that we've failed our population, that healthcare should be teaching people how they can take control in their own lives to protect themselves against diseases, and not trying to offer them a pill mentality to solve a problem.
True prevention is not part of the healthcare system, because the healthcare system, like any other system, is a money-making system.
The U.S. healthcare system is a system based on profit.
Drugs and surgery, a pill for every ill mentality.
If its intention was to really make people healthy, then it would be a very unprofitable system. As it is now, you got the commodity, which is sick, fat people, which everybody's getting fat off of, so to speak, economically.
There is a tremendous amount of money being spent right now to find the cure for diabetes, and much, much, much less money being spent to figure out how to prevent type 2 diabetes, and even how to prevent the triggers to type 1 diabetes.
What's called prevention now is really primary intervention. So, we wait till we diagnose you with something, and then we have all these, procedures we could do to try and lower your risk.
The money comes into doctors' offices based on how much we treat, how much medication we prescribe, how many procedures we do, how much surgery we do.
I mean, I've had many doctors tell me, look, between you and me, the reason I'm making $1 million a year is because I do a lot of procedures.
The doctors are getting rich, the drug companies are getting rich, the hospitals are getting rich, the insurance companies are getting rich off of all this sickness. After all, the bigger the business, the more money these insurance companies make. And so all the financial incentive is towards sickness.
There's no economic incentive to teach people how to eat well, how to exercise more, how to get enough sleep to stay healthy. The financial incentive is in treating illnesses.
We've given millions of dollars to the American Cancer Society. Most of that money has gone to the drug research and drug companies finding us to have a solution. We have a pill solution for everything. It's like people think life is a fairy tale. We're going to find a magic wand and say you can be healthy. They don't realize that you have to earn good health.
The medical profession right now is doing what? We're feasting on selling disease. And we are so successful on selling sickness that there are not enough dollars in this country to pay for it.
I've talked to many cancer doctors, and I said, well, what about diet? Well, yes, of course. What about prevention? Oh, sure. I said, did you learn much about that? No, we didn't. Are you interested? Not really. Because it's not high tech, there's no money involved, and there's nothing involved in telling people go and eat more fruits and vegetables.
The degree to which profit and profit-seeking, profit motive has sucked the spirit out of healing and medicine and replaced it with something that's unworthy of us as human beings.
Healthcare in this country is expensive because we let it be, and we let business control things. I mean, if we were just talking about a drug-based business, most of the good drugs are generic, and they're really cheap. Best blood pressure pills there are diuretics that cost, a penny for many pills. Whereas what's sold are the $4 a piece blood pressure pills, which are less effective, which has been proven, less effective and more dangerous. But it's the profit that drives the kind of care that we have.
We have this new religion in modern America today, and that religion I call medicology, the belief that our savior is the doctor or the medical profession or the pharmaceutical companies who think that giving us a pill is our answer to a long, healthy life.
My wife says, whatever you do, stay out of the hospital under all circumstances, and she's a doctor.
To a degree, I think that the medical, governmental, and pharmaceutical complex has failed us. Our educational system has failed us. It hasn't given people the knowledge they've needed to control their health destiny. We want to believe in magic.
A true healthcare system would be one that empowered people and gave them the information they needed to take care of themselves.
People don't eat vegetables when they're pregnant. Women don't eat vegetables, so instead we tell them to take a folate pill. Right? They don't eat vegetables, so the baby comes out, we give them a shot of vitamin K into the baby's thigh. We've turned everything into a medical solution instead of getting back to the basics of what constitutes a healthy life.
If you change the financial incentives in our healthcare system so that good health, good function, and a good diet were the rewards, then we'd see a change in our health overnight.
In America today, our diet is predominantly from processed foods, oils, sweets, and animal products. The amount of fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and seeds in the American diet is dismally low.
The scientific evidence is fairly clear that humans thrive on a plant-based diet that's relatively low in fat, high in fiber.
It has a low calorie density, a high nutrient density, and a high satiety.
A wide variety of fresh vegetables, green ones, yellow ones, red ones, orange ones, all kinds of colors, and whole grains.
Plant-based, whole food, unrefined, unprocessed diet.
What I recommend for all the families in my practice, fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, pasta, a little tofu.
What are the nations that don't have many of these chronic illnesses that we in the Western world do have? And the diet that seems to do that the safest and the best is a plant-based diet.
Any society that we can look at the world over that had long life and a very healthy life expectancy in the most elderly members always had a diet rich in vegetables.
Not only do we see populations that eat this type of diet suffering from far less degenerative disease than we suffer from here in the United States, but we see people who are ill reversing their illnesses when they adopt this type of dietary plan.
It doesn't include things like high fructose corn syrup. It doesn't include things like hot dogs and hamburgers. It doesn't include things like milkshakes. It's interesting, it doesn't include a lot of things that are standard in the American diet.
No diet can be considered healthy unless the vast majority of its calories come from these primary naturally nutrient-rich plant foods.
That's going to really save us from these chronic illnesses, the classic example of which is, of course, is cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke. That same approach is going to protect us, I'm really quite sure, from Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Most of those diseases of dementia seem to have a very important vascular component as a precursor.
People who lived on rice, like the Asians, or sweet potatoes, like the people from New Guinea, or plain potatoes, like the people in the Andes, Peru and Chile, corn for the Indians. It's been a starch-based diet.
How are you going to be obese when you're eating a plant-based diet? How are you going to have diabetes or hypertension?
Just a really elegant, simple diet, plant-based protein, a lot of fiber.
And the great thing here is that we can control our health destiny. We don't have to be sick, and we don't have to have happen to us these tragedies that befall other Americans.
People do not need to eat animals to be healthy.
Virtually every nutrient you need you could get on a well-rounded, unprocessed, unrefined plant-based diet.
Eating animal products, eating animal protein is one of the unhealthiest ways to eat.
What I have seen is that most people, when they stop eating animal products, they feel better and they're healthier. They lose the weight that they were carrying that wasn't necessary. Their joints get cooler and they feel better. Their range of motion increases physically. Their endurance increases.
There's a direct connection between eating more beef and developing intestinal cancer. There's a direct connection between children drinking lots of whole cow's milk and becoming obese. We know this, we've studied it, we published it, and doctors still ignore it, and we teach our patients to ignore it.
Without question, the best diet for us is a diet that is based either entirely or almost entirely on nothing but plant foods.
I mean, you could be healthy on a diet that includes a small amount of animal products.
Just because you cut animals out of your diet doesn't automatically mean the diet you're left with is healthy. You still have to learn how to eat healthy and consume low-calorie dense, high nutrient dense foods.
You can't design a diet that can be healthy if it gets a majority of calories or too many calories from animal products. And you can't design a diet to be healthy if you get too many calories from processed foods like sugar and white flour either.
People not only do not need animal products to be healthy, if they consume them in significant amounts, they'll be sick, just like Westerners are. They're sick and fat.
Exercise is crucial for health, and you can watch every morsel you put in your mouth, and if you insist on being a sedentary person, you're going to have health issues.
Exercise changes everything. It changes your brain chemistry, it changes the way you digest and metabolize food, it changes the way you feel.
This whole idea of being sedentary is a real aberration. It's not natural. And it's strange, and it's very, very unhealthy.
If you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, it wasn't all that long ago that we were hunter-gatherers and cave dwellers, and we burned up an enormous amount of calories every day moving around. So we're simply not adapted to being sedentary people.
I tell the patients in my practice, especially the fathers, that you need to get 2 hours of exercise a day, and they laugh at me.
Obviously, there are other factors besides diet and nutrition that determine good health. And those other factors may be getting sufficient rest and sleep. We have a chronically sleep-deprived society, and that's not good for our general health. That's well established. We need to exercise regularly. We have a population that's not physically fit, and we develop sarcopenia. In other words, that means our muscles shrink as we get older, predisposing us to bone loss, falling down, breaking our hips, having poor musculoskeletal fitness in later years.
As people get into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, if you get 2 hours of exercise each day, you're going to be able to do a lot more with the other 22 hours than you would be with the 24 hours without exercise.
Personally, I think anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes a day is more than enough for anybody. But if you look at national recommendations, you know, they originally went from 30 minutes a day, then they went to 60 minutes a day, and now they're upwards of 90 minutes a day in order to maintain and or lose weight. Well, the only reason they've had to increase the exercise guidelines so much is because people are eating so many more calories and they're trying to offset the extra calories we're all eating.
And as far as children are concerned, everybody wants a magic answer. All the best dog trainers know that if you want a healthy, happy, well-behaved dog, exercise the dog an hour, 2 hours a day. If you want happy, healthy children, get them a couple of hours of exercise. It's not as easy as it used to be, where we used to be able to walk out our front door and we'd play kick the can or play tag after dinner.
And of course, people don't get enough sunshine. They're afraid of the sun because of the loss of the ozone layer and skin cancer. But skin cancer is also caused by the low nutrients in our diet, which increases our risk of cancer when we do get sun exposure.
Exercise plays a huge role in health. Actually, moving is what plays a role in health. It doesn't have to be exercise per se.
I hate exercising. I will not exercise. It just so happens, though, that I windsurf for 2 to 3 hours, 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm out there having a good time. And it just happens to give me some physical activity. I've got grandchildren. Every chance I get, which again amounts to 2 or 3 times a week, I'll take the smallest grandchild, throw them in the backpack, and hike up in the mountains for an hour or two. But that's not exercise. To me, that's just fun. The side product is I do work the muscles.
If you move, if you dance, if you play tennis, if you swim, if you sing, and you move your whole body as you do so, you play with your kids and just be physical.
It's important for your immune system. It's important to prevent you from having falls. It's important to prevent you from getting injured. Now we know that it helps your brain. It certainly helps your heart. Almost all the systems of the body are helped by exercise.
And of course, the biggest objection people give me is they don't have the time, but you either spend the time to engage in activities that prevent illness, or you spend the time engaging in activities that treat illness resulting from not spending the time to stay healthy. So I don't have a lot of patience with that particular objection.
I try to swim at least a mile every day.
People are naturally designed to have, throughout human history, moved that body around. It's just in our society where they're so sick from the wrong food, they don't feel like moving.
Processed person is someone who has bought into the media hype, the advertising about the usual way, the way that we've always eaten, the way we've always conducted our lives. We're just processed right straight through the system. It starts at birth when they steal away breast milk and they replace it with processed infant formula. It continues when they tell our mothers that it's too dangerous to make our baby food. We have to buy the processed baby food. It continues when your child hits 10, 12, 15 months of age, when we actually are convinced that it's okay to give our kid French fries, that it's okay to get processed fruits and vegetables instead of fresh fruits and vegetables. We are processed through this system from birth all the way through the first years of life, and then we're taught to eat things that are not really food, where they've put together little pieces of food and turned it into a processed meal. And we get processed through this system all throughout our lives, and we have to break out of it. Eat food. Don't eat food-like things. Don't be fooled into eating processed food stuff. Eat food. We're processed people because we let them process us.
I see about 100 patients a week, so several thousand a year, who come in with all kinds of health problems. And the irony is many of these are many of the best educated, wealthiest people in America, and yet they still have all of the same health problems that everybody else does. Heart disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, and cancers. So the blessing is that I get to see on a daily basis what happens to these people when they implement these changes in a controlled environment. And on average, I see somewhere around 50 to 75% of them just throw away their medications with no longer the need for them, and sometimes as little as 2 to 3 weeks. I see cholesterol levels drop from 300 to 150. I see type 1 diabetics who take 110 units of insulin drop down to 10 or 12 units. I see type 2 diabetics get off.
Well, I had a young lady come to me about a year and a half ago with early stage MS who had started taking pharmaceutical drugs on the recommendation of her doctor. Was very concerned about her health and the rapid degeneration that she was experiencing, and adopted this program of dietary excellence that we recommend with a few modifications, and is drug-free, symptom-free, and of course, gave her life back. And I tell you, this isn't me. This is the diet. This is the power of the diet.
Now, when I was traditionally practicing medicine, I was just loading them up with drugs. They stayed fat and sick, and all they did was carry around a bag full of drugs. And that's it. You look around at your friends and relatives who go to the doctor faithfully every month, and what you see is fat, sick people carrying around a bag full of drugs. In my practice, it's entirely different. What happens is people change their diet, they get some exercise, they clean up some bad habits, and what happens is their physical appearance, their activity, everything about them changes for the positive. And I get a good feeling about that because I've made a positive difference in their life.
A person who's told they need angioplasty or bypass surgery, reverse their condition, clean out their vessels, have a robust and healthy life without free of any medications at all in subsequent years, and having hundreds of people with diabetes no longer require medications, and of course, and getting rid of their diabetes, not just control it, and seeing people with blood pressure be able to throw their medications away.
I come into work, many mornings, and there's people who are just waiting at the door to see me because they have seen the first time in decades their numbers on their blood profiles and their risk factors are all in the normal range for the first time ever. And they've gone the healthcare route. They've had operations, they've had stents, they've had bypasses, they've taken multiple medications. Many of the patients are on half a dozen to a dozen medications. And then sometimes, just within several weeks of working with them, I come in and, there aren't words to really describe it, but when you see the joy in somebody's face because for the first time they're really seeing the power, and they think like a miracle has happened or I've done something magic to them, and I just tell them that no, the miracle's in them, that they are the miracle. All I've done is help them sort through the information and see which is what really worked for them.
So you get people with terrible heart disease, chest pain, they can't walk across the room. Change their diet, chest pain goes away. You take people with a terrible inflammatory arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, and you change their diet. And what was once a completely incapacitating, potentially very fatal disease becomes history, and they become fully functional. And sometimes people laugh at me when I say this, that they'll always get better. And I've had doctors challenge me with this in medical meetings. So you can't say they'll always get better from following the same kind of diet. And you know what I ask them? I say, how many patients have you asked to quit smoking who haven't gotten better? Raise your hand, tell me about what? Never a response. How many drunks have you taken off the booze who haven't gotten better? Well, no one has an experience other than they always get better. Same thing with the food. You change it from grease to starch, and people always get better because you change it from wrong to right. It always works. It's that profound.
What's going to happen if we don't change in our diet and lifestyle is what is happening today to people who haven't. They get sicker and sicker and heavier and heavier.
We are the most obese nation in history. And obesity, as everybody knows, is not just an aesthetic thing.
There are little blips. They report that there's less of a certain type of cancer this year than there was last year, or less heart disease this year. But overall, the trend is absolutely terrible.
Diabetes is the next epidemic, and it's in children. And that's what really worries me.
And it's so clear now to everybody that it's directly related to diet.
We know what happens to an adult when they turn 50 or 60 and they get type 2 diabetes or heart disease. We know the tremendous impact they have and the costs, not only to our nation, but also to them.
We get paid more for heroic things. We get paid for doing heart transplants, for trying out brand new chemotherapeutic agents. We get paid for diagnosing infections and treating with new antibiotics. We don't get paid for prevention. We get paid for waiting for people to get sick and then treating them.
I know the Center for Disease Control is predicting this is the first generation that's going to dramatically live a shorter lifespan than their parents.
Well, we're now seeing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease in children under 20 years old. What's going to happen in the next 10 and 20 years when the fallout of those diseases that we used to see in adults that were 60 and 70 is now happening in children who are 30 and 40?
We've pretty much come to the conclusion through science, through careful science, that the more weight we gain as a child, the younger we die as an adult. So we do have some pretty dramatic possibilities that may occur in future years if Americans don't make these changes.
The cost of health care in America has risen, again, year by year by year, and it will keep going up if we insist on paying doctors who want to be heroes rather than being teachers.
This country will not be able to afford the kinds of drugs and procedures that will be necessary for the carnage that the Western diet inflicts. We won't be able to afford it. It'll just be that simple. And then there may be a very awkward period where only certain segments of the society can afford care. I hope that won't occur.
What may not be so clear is that our diet is directly related to a lot of other things that are very hard to get rid of in America. And that, what I was talking about earlier in the bottom line and people wanting to make large amounts of money, people are also willing to make large amounts of money making you sick. If they know that they're making a product that is not healthy, but people are buying it in huge amounts and it tastes good and it's cheap and they sell hundreds of millions of them, it's going to be a big struggle to tell them, look, you are doing something immoral.
On the other hand, I think the fact that things have gone downhill, that diabetes and obesity has skyrocketed with no end in sight, and that healthcare costs have gone up 500% in the last 5 years, and that with no end in sight, and putting corporations under tremendous economic stress, making jobs go overseas, and corporations going bankrupt, and I think that's a motivating factor where people are now opening up their eyes and looking at things and looking at the possibility of change. And for me, I see it as an opportunity.
There is no way that this planet can support a meat-eating species as large as human beings in the numbers that we now exist. And if the rest of the world continues to try and emulate our lifestyle, we're just going to destroy our planet.
Never before did I see in the newspaper a discussion about if the subsidies given to the meat and dairy industries is something we should be continuing doing while there's no subsidies giving to fruit and vegetables. That question has never even been looked at in the conventional newspapers.
And again, this availability of information. You know, somebody goes to the doctor, they're diagnosed with arthritis, the doctor says take this COX-2 inhibitor, they get on the internet, they look up, you know, what's going on with this drug, they find out about side effects and go, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to look for some other option, and they go actively seeking it. So I think the more of this kind of thing we see going on, the more we're going to see people looking to diet and lifestyle. It is going to spread.
We don't have to have the rampant obesity we see in our culture. We don't have to have the epidemics of diabetes that is increasing in our culture. We could have a much leaner, stronger, more fit, more clear thinking, more capable of critical thinking population.
You know, I've been recently working with the Bank of Hawaii, where now they're courting unions, IPA association of 750 physicians who are trying to utilize nutritional protocols to improve the health of their patients, to reduce healthcare costs as a public policy of a doctor policy in all of Hawaii. These things are now being considered and being discussed, would never have been looked at if we hadn't seen obesity rates and diabetes rates and things coming to a certain point of crisis.
When I was a child, cigarette smoking was the norm. And it was acceptable behavior, and even doctors smoked. And then people understood the real impact of cigarette smoking on health. Things have changed. I remember a 2-martini lunch was something to brag about, but not these days. It's embarrassing to be a drunk in public. So, you know, things could change if we got the awareness out there that being fat and sick and consuming all this rich food is a disgrace. It's a disgrace on you. It's a disgrace on your family. It's a disgrace on society. And if we could bring it to that level of understanding, I think we could change. I really do. I think people are smart enough and they care enough about themselves that if they had the information, if they had the truth, they would act on it.
It's commonly said today that the earth is dying. Someone once said that's not true. There are people killing it. And those people have names and they have addresses. They're actual people. There's a lot of us participating in that killing unknowingly or unconsciously, by not making responsible choices. And there are a lot of us wanting to make responsible choices, wanting to make healthy choices, healthy for Earth, healthy for us and for the Earth. And I gain great joy from being part of that collective power.
John is what doctors call a super obese toddler, part of a new epidemic. Children as young as 2 and 3 who are extremely overweight.
The rise of obesity amongst young Americans is one of the most alarming statistics that there is. We should have physical fitness programs and nutrition programs in schools. Every parent should know what's going on.
And Councilwoman Perry went on to tell us that in some places in her district, it's easier to get a handgun than it is to get some of these fruits and vegetables that she's talking about.
2 of the top-selling prescription drugs in the world may not work.
We are going to make sure that we manage chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease that cost a huge amount but could be prevented.
This idea that fat cells in the body somehow release these hormones which serve as a fuel for cancers.
After 9 years of follow-up, they found that those who ate a diet heavy in refined grains, processed meats, fried foods, and sweetened or diet soda had a dramatically increased risk of metabolic syndrome, which is a group of risk factors that can lead to cardiovascular disease and diabetes.
Contrary to what you may have been told, there are bad foods, foods which can produce sickness and misery beyond measure. We have every right to be angry at the madness which brought us to this point. And we have every reason to be hopeful as well. The lives we want to live are right at the tips of our fingers. It's not up to the government, your parents, your favorite restaurant, your supermarket, to make the lifestyle changes critical to good health. It's up to you. Educate yourself. Don't be a processed person.